Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow.
The big news. Elliot has arrived. So for those of you who don't know what in the world that's all about, we kind of launched last week with the idea that that our granddaughter was imminent. Okay, that we had waited for a long time for this, and we were just kind of waiting day by day for when she would arrive, and we use that because there's an imagery in the scriptures. I mean, Paul talks about that. Use that as one of his big images of hope. This idea that all of creation is in this longing, this groaning, as in childbirth, and sets that up for talking about hope. And so it was I was glad my son and daughter-in-law played into the whole illustration idea. But we were waiting, and then, because I know you want to know the details, Wednesday morning we get this phone call saying, okay, looks like it's going to happen today. We're about ready to leave for the hospital and all this kind of stuff. Now, some of you have been down this road, so you know there's a whole lot of sub-story that has to go with this. But so we get all jazzed on that. And, Ruthie immediately wants to leave, like right now. Let's head up, because they were in a hospital up in the city up here. And yet I've got a project going on at the house. I had one of the guys working there and said, okay, we can't leave until he's done. So we went out and kept telling him, okay, can you get this thing moving here? Because you're kind of the hang up here. And so as soon as that was done, we pop in the car, we blast up to the hospital up there, and we're waiting. We're kind of in this section where there's other people kind of waiting there with us, this little waiting vicinity thing where all the chairs are a little bit too small and the couches are a little too small, so you can't really sprawl. You're just kind of there, and it's pretty stark, and you're hearing all that's going on, in these other rooms here, like right next to us. There's this one room with a mother that was a little bit farther along there, and we hear this, okay, push, come on, you can do this, let's go. And then finally you hear a cry coming from this room and a cry from the other room, and our son and daughter-in-law are waiting at the end of the hall. And so we're waiting for this thing, and waiting, and waiting. So we get it, we're up there at midday, and the day goes and goes and goes. We keep thinking, okay, it's just about now, any time now. No. And we wait, and pretty soon it's dark out, and we're waiting, and there have been other mothers who have come and gone. And, and we're waiting, and it gets, into the night, and so... But we're more invested now. Okay, we can't go home all the way to Santa Cruz and back. We're invested in this. It could happen any time, and so we wait, and all the way through the night we wait, and we're all punchy now, and can't see straight, and you're trying to sleep in these weird things, and finally, 4:00 in the morning. Finally, okay, and we all the right things are happening, and so we go down the hall, and we're standing right outside the door there, and anticipating all of this, and almost exactly 4:00 in the morning, we hear the cry. Elliot has arrived, and the joy and the excitement of that, of someone that we have anticipated for so long, is now here. I've thought a lot about this, but I thought about the connection with hope on this thing, and some of the features of hope all play out in this thing. There's a longing that's in this, and hope has a longing with it. There is waiting, and hope always involves waiting. It's something that is yet to happen. It's not now, it's yet to happen. And there is also, particularly in biblical hope, there is some kind of evidence that validates this. That the hope we have is grounded in something. There's the expectation that you can legitimately hope for something, and it's all there. We've launched into this thing on hope, and everybody lives with hope. Everyone in this room has hopes. Somehow hope is what moves us forward in life to a large degree. Everyone has hopes. Some of you have hopes that this relationship that you have just entered into is going to work out. Some of you have hopes that the job you just got is going to work out. Some of you have hopes that you're going to get a job. Some of you have hopes you've just launched into your college career, and you have hopes out into the future of what that's going to play into and what you'd like to do with your life. Some of you have hopes that the latest treatments and medications are going to somehow deal with whatever you have. You have hopes in all sorts of realms. You hope that somehow the conflicts in your life will be resolved. You have hopes. You look to the future and you expect something to happen. You hope for it. There are dreams that you have. Is another way you could describe some of those things. There's sometimes just wishful thinking, but somehow it plays into the future. Hope. Hope is what carries us through things. Hope is what lights us up about something out there in the future. One of those things that perhaps you've heard over and over again, the three grand essentials for happiness in life. Remember what they are? What they are? Something to do, something to love, and something to hope for. Hope is one of those grand essentials for anybody to experience some kind of happiness, so to speak, in this life. But as we noticed last week, that hope is one of the grand essentials for our redeemed life. One of those core features that are part of this thing. Paul, as he writes about it in 1 Corinthians 13, which we lock onto love in this one here, but he makes this statement that is made elsewhere in the scriptures. You start to look for it and you'll see it all over the place. He says, now abide these three essential items: faith, hope, love. Those are three essentials. These are the ongoing, enduring, foundational elements of our relationship in Christ, our redemptive life. Faith, hope, love. Now, we spent a lot of time with faith. We spent a lot of time talking about love. Hope, to me, seems like it's the little gray area in between those two words. It's almost like it operates as a hyphen between them. But hope is the central feature of so much of what the scriptures talk about. The hope that God has called us to. The hope that God gives to us is not wishful thinking. It's not some false sense of security. It's not just a dream, a pipe dream of some kind. I described, I think, what is a concise definition of hope last time, and I want to keep driving it and then building upon it. That hope is faith that actively anticipates the future. Hope is faith that actively anticipates the future. That if our faith is simply about the past, then it's missing a key feature of it. If I believe, yes, all those things that God did in the past, I believe all those things. I believe all of those, including the fact that Jesus died and rose again. That's good, but you're missing a feature of what's involved in this thing. Even if you carry it a bit farther and say, well, it's about the present as well. I believe all these things are true, including that Jesus died and rose again, and therefore I'm going to live differently now. That's wonderful, but it's still missing a key feature. Because faith, based on Hebrews 11, faith fuels hope. And hope is what moves us forward. It's not just the past, not just the present, but what moves us forward. Scriptures say that prior to coming to Christ, we had no hope. That we were without hope and without God in this world. And now we have encountered this person of Jesus, and this redemption that he has brought to us gives us hope. So much so that when Peter writes, he says, in the midst of a world that's crazy and nuts and life that is always seems always unfair, to be ready to give an answer or reason for the hope that is in you. Not just for the faith that you have, but for the hope, that which drives you forward, that which you now live for, the hope that is in you. I've come to believe in my study over this year into hope here that hope, God calls us to a practice of hope, an intentional practice of hope. It's like a spiritual discipline where we choose to not just believe things are true, but to anchor them to something in the future that moves us forward. Now with this, I like to kind of move us a little bit farther down the road here and have us look at a portion of Scripture today that, that comes out of the Old Testament. So it's Jeremiah chapter 17. So if you have your Bible with you, find Jeremiah 17. Verse 7 is what we're going to close in on, but it's got information on either side of it that we're going to see as well. But Jeremiah 17, verse 7. And this may be a familiar scripture to you, this statement here. It says, "Blessed is the one whose hope is in the Lord, and whose hope is the Lord." Now, maybe your translation is a bit different. Maybe it says, "Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord," or something like that. But the word that's used here, the Hebrew word used here, is the Hebrew word for hope. For hope. Blessed is the one whose hope is in the Lord, and whose hope is the Lord. Now, when Jeremiah wrote this, he wrote to late 7th century BC, and he wrote to a group of people who had an exaggerated view of themselves, and whose hope was really built around the whole idea of their own genius for figuring life out. And he writes this statement into their lives. As you look at this, I'd like us to draw 4 observations from this one statement here. 4 observations. First one is this: that hope is only as good as its source. Hope is only as good as its source, or its reason why you have the hope that you have. In this case, he says, "Blessed is the one whose hope is in the Lord." Now, when you see that, there's some things to kind of play off on that. One is if my hope is in the Lord, it also it means that my hope is not in myself, and that's usually where we go. I mean, we live in a place and a time where we're the kind of expectations is that you will be enough for life, that you will gear up for this thing, and you're going to take on life and challenge it, and it's all about us making it in life. But the problem with that is that we encounter all the way along through life that we're simply not enough. In fact, that question has become a big thing. Back here a few years ago, I did some focus group things and kind of asked what are some of the questions that people in your decade of life are asking themselves. And this was not just believers, it was unbelievers as well. It's just people in general. What kind of questions are people asking themselves in your decade? Whether your decade is the 20s or the 30s or the 40s or whatever. And the reason I did that is because life has these significant changes as you go through life. That life circumstances are continuously changing around us. And one of the questions I found that recurred in every single one of the decades was the question, am I enough? Now, you recognize the question. Maybe you're asking yourself this, whether you are consciously or unconsciously, but asking this question, am I enough? Am I enough for life's challenges? Am I enough to somehow make it through this? Am I enough? And the answer, to be realistic, is no. I'm not enough. As much as I would like to think I'm enough or can be enough, the answer is no. I'm going to continuously come up short on this. And part of encountering that is this idea that I must look outside of myself. I must look beyond myself. And in this case, Jeremiah writes, "Blessed is the one whose hope is in the Lord. That I am not enough, therefore I look to him to be the enough for me." The statement implies that not only am I not enough, but nothing else is enough. In fact, the idea that I am not enough, I came across this past week. Proverbs 28, verse 26 says this: "Those who place their hope in themselves ready for this, are fools. Those who place their hope in themselves, that somehow I am going to make it. I'm going to be the one who somehow proves that it can be done. It says, those who place their hope in themselves are fools. I am not enough. Not only am I not enough, but others aren't enough. I cannot place my hope in myself, but also it means that I'm not going to be placing my hope in others. Others who may offer promises or ideas. And that's sometimes where we go. That I'm going to place all my hopes in somebody else, that they will somehow help me make it through this life. But rather, my hope is in the Lord. A bit of a caution on this. Because it may mean, when we come to this here, that somehow we still stay the focus of our life. That it's still about me, and I realize that I am not enough to accomplish all my dreams and all this kind of stuff. So I'm going to look to the Lord for him to fulfill my dreams. That he will be the one that will make it all happen. He will be the one that will make this relationship work or get me out of this situation or whatever it is. And the caution is this, that we can't view God as simply the genie in the book. Okay, now it's the same idea, if you had a genie in the lamp idea, that I kind of rub this and I hope, and poof, it happens. And the Christian version of that can be, probably not you and I, but can be, that we open the scriptures and we read a few verses and then pray and then poof, it'll happen. And the problem is, poof, it won't happen. That God is not here to simply be the one who enables our own broken dreams, but the one who replaces them with something else. The idea of the Lord being the one who we place our hope in is an idea that I am hoping in him for who he is and for what he has done and for what he has promised in the future. But my hope is not that God will do what I want, but God will be who he is and do what he does. That he will remain the one that I find in the scriptures, and I can place my hope in him, knowing that he will be the one who determines my future. That's the difference. But notice here that it says, blessed is the one whose hope is in the Lord, and whose hope is the Lord. Now, this is partly just simply a Hebrew way of saying things, to say it twice and to kind of amplify it a second time, that type of deal. But there is a progression on it. And the second part here is the game changer. Because to say, well, I recognize that I'm not enough, and so I'm going to look outside of myself to someone else, to God, to do this, is not unique to us as believers. I mean, you can find all sorts of groups who would say, yes, I need to acknowledge a higher power. I need to realize that I am not enough, and so I need a higher power. And those people might even look at us as believers and say, well, you just have a Christian version of that. Fine, if that's what you want to call it. But the scriptures have this foundation for it that lets me go there in a way that has much more validity and foundation than any other higher power, so to speak. But notice here, as Jeremiah writes, he says, not only is blessed is the one whose hope is in the Lord, but whose hope is the Lord. And that's the game changer. It moves us from simply seeing God as an enabler to being God who is the actual fulfillment of my hope. He is himself what I long for. As you look into the scriptures, you find things like in Genesis 15, as God is speaking with Abraham and working out how this whole thing is going to work. He makes this statement to Abraham. He says, I am your great reward. It's not, I will do all these things for you and all that. Yes, that's all part of it. But he focuses Abraham, saying, no, it's me. I am the great reward. The hope that we find in the scriptures is more focused on a person than on a promise. And that's an important distinction on that. Our hope is not simply that God will do all these things, but our hope is to be with him. He is the fulfillment of it all. Psalm 42 says several times in the course of that psalm that God himself is my hope. He is my hope, my ultimate desire. You come into the New Testament, and Paul writes to Timothy, very first verse of that first letter, refers to Jesus, who is himself our hope. Not the one who's going to be the enabler. He is it. He is the full package. He is the one. He is our hope. Paul writes to the Colossian believers, Colossians 1:27, he says that it all comes down to this: Christ in you, the hope of glory. It is him. He is our hope. Not what he brings with it, just him. The longing to be with him, the desire for him. Let me give you just a little picture to work with here. Last summer when we had some of our grandsons at our house for a while, which is a riotous time when they're here. I mean, little boys running around, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, this kind of stuff. And we do all the guy stuff like this. And one of the days when they were here, one of my grandsons, Paxton, was following me around outside. And so I was trying to dream up things for him to do. I said, so what do you want to do, Paxton? I mean, you want to get the bow and arrow out and shoot that stuff around, or a slingshot? You want to chase lizards? I mean, what do you want to do? I came up with all this, play catch, whatever. And he gave a line that almost buckled my knees when I heard it. Because Papa, I don't care. I just want to do something with you. I thought, yes. But what a cool statement. This idea, I don't care what it is, as long as I'm doing it with you. And I think that's exactly what our Lord longs to hear from us. I don't care what it is, as long as I'm with you. Because it's not what you are going to do for me. It's the whole idea of just being with you. You are the fulfillment. You capture everything I long for in life. Ultimately, it all comes down to you. Blessed is the one whose hope is in the Lord and whose hope is the Lord. The focus is on a person more than a promise. And that distinguishes our hope. It's wrapped up in a person. So, first of all, hope is only as good as its source. Secondly, the Lord himself is the fulfillment of our hope. But then third, I want you to notice how this line begins here, this verse. It says, blessed is the one. That idea of being blessed, and the Hebrew word and terminology and idea that all flows with this thing is the idea, if someone is blessed, there's a sense of well-being that goes with it, that life is good. There's a sense that you are being favored. You're the recipient of good things. There's a joy that comes with it. On its highest level, there's almost a giddiness that comes. Wow, look at this. In the midst of anything. It says, blessed is the one whose hope is in the Lord and whose hope is the Lord. Blessed. Now here's where you need to notice the context. Because if you back yourself up on this to verse 5, he has created a context for this statement to come out. It says, thus says the Lord, cursed is the man who trusts in mankind and makes flesh his strength, whose heart turns away from the Lord. For he will be like a bush in the desert and will not see when prosperity comes, but will live in stony wastes in the wilderness, a land of salt that cannot be inhabited. Now let me take that verse 5 and let me restate it for you, because it kind of sounds a little weird the way it comes out initially. Here's what it says. Doomed to disappointment and failure is the one who risks everything by placing hope in earthly things of this life and counting on oneself to be enough for whatever lies ahead. That's the statement. That's exactly what Jeremiah is saying. Doomed to disappointment and failure. It may seem like it's working for a while. I'm pulling it off. It's happening. But he said it isn't going to happen. Doomed to failure ultimately. Because apart from Jesus, there is no hope. Apart from him, everything is kind of revolves around us and our own doings of things and a little bit of chance here and there. But hope, ultimate hope for all that we really desire in the core of our being, comes from a person, the person of Jesus. The imagery goes on the other side of this verse. Look at verse 8. After talking about blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord and whose trust is the Lord, he says, for this person will be like a tree planted by the water that extends its roots by a stream and will not fear when the heat comes, but its leaves will be green. It will not be anxious in a year of drought, nor cease to yield its fruit. Then in the midst of life and all that comes with it, the person whose hope is in our Lord flourishes, no matter what it is. I mean, it's quite an imagery for the time that we live in right now. I mean, the summer that we're in. I'm not sure what happens at your home right now, but I know at my home, my wife and I walked around at the beginning of the summer and had a talk with each of our plants. And we told some of them, you made the cut. Okay, we'll be watering you. Others, you're on your own, buddy. And you can tell which ones made the cut. I mean, there's certain ones flourishing, and other ones that have already shriveled up and they are gone. And it's the picture that he gives here. The one who has placed our hopes in the Lord and whose hope is himself the Lord flourish, no matter what happens in life. But there's another piece here. And that comes out in a statement that is, or a word here, that I'm sure you can't see in your translation. This is where I earn my pay to do this, Because it sounds simple. It says, blessed is the one whose hope is in this place. That word, the one, has more to it than it seems. Because as Jeremiah writes to these people, he uses a word here that has a very distinctive nuance to it. Because it describes someone who bravely risks in order to pursue something. That's the word, simply translated, the one. And it changes the dynamic. So what he's saying here is, blessed is the one, the brave person who risks everything to place hopes in the Lord and whose hope is the Lord himself. There's a risk involved in this. You're choosing to step outside of what seems normal. I came across a quote here, and I just found it this past week. Comes off of a TED Talk. Familiar with TED Talks? Okay, yeah. Great source of insights. But it's just this one statement in here. One of the person speaking, which it doesn't matter who it was, the person speaking said, one of the greatest obstacles to transformation is common sense. Now think about that for a moment. One of the greatest obstacles to transformation is common sense. And went on to describe it. He said, one of the greatest obstacles is what we have taken to be givens, what we believe simply to be true and cannot be violated. This is just the way life is. And when we buy into that, it inhibits any possibility of change. Well, I saw that in spiritual light. for us as believers, if we have too much common sense going on, you might say, too many givens, too many ways that we look at life and say it cannot change, then we lock ourselves out of what God has promised to us. Because hope involves a risk, where we're choosing to believe something, our body of something, that propels us into the future. Believing something about the future that changes the present. Believing that this is what is coming, the revealing of the sons of God. That's you and I, men and women. The person of Jesus and coming face to face with him. It all changes the present. Let me put one more story in the end here. I don't know what the timing is. Just don't tell me. You've got a lot of missions activity going on here, and so it's good to drop a missions story into this. Back here at the end of the 90s, I was involved in a couple of mission trips into the heart of Siberia. This came right after, immediately after the freedom had come. And the freedom hadn't really come yet. It kind of came as a wave, started in Moscow, kind of moved its way across. Well, so technically the freedom was there in Siberia, but the word wasn't really out to everyone. It was kind of just an idea. And so we took a dental team in, and we did a couple of trips in and all this kind of stuff. On the second trip in, first day of the trip, one of our team members lost or had stolen a passport. Now, at that time in the Soviet, what was still kind of considered the Soviet Union, that was kind of the worst case scenario. Because in the history of the Soviet Union, no one had ever left the country without a passport. So this was a bit of a dire situation. Not only that, but you couldn't travel in the country without a passport. So we couldn't get from where we were to an embassy to get a new passport. So it's like there's no hope. They're kind of stuck here. So here we were in a country that was cold and bleak. I mean, they built new buildings to look old. Just a funky place. And we're stuck there. It actually set into motion an international incident. It never made it to the news, but it was a big, big deal between Washington and Moscow, which I didn't realize how much until I got back. Oh, really? We were about that. But I found myself, I chose, we were going to send the rest of the team back, and I chose I will stay there with this person until it gets resolved. And I found myself at that point with only one desire, and that was to see the person I love in this life, to see my wife. And everything else just didn't matter. All the other possibilities of life just simply didn't matter. I longed to see her, the love of my life. And this, there's a long story that goes with this, but it came right up to literally the last seconds when the plane was about to leave and the negotiations went on, and finally word came from Moscow to this station manager that was still sporting his uniforms and all this stuff. Let them go. And imagery, I can still remember as we ran down the hallway, that me and this one other person, and out onto the tarmac and up into the plane, and when they closed the doors, it was still dead silent, because we knew that everything can change still. And then as the plane ran down the runway, and when the wheels first lifted off, the cheers that went up inside the plane. We're free. We made it. which is a picture of our redemption. We were in a foreign, you and I, in a foreign, hostile place, dark and cold. And God has redeemed us and brought us out. And there are the cheers that come with that. But he's redeemed us not just simply to be taken out of there. He's redeemed us to bring us to himself, the lover of our souls. The hope that we have is not simply about what God can do for us, but is himself. He longs for us to long for him. And that is the essence, the core of the hope that God gives to us. Hope in the scriptures is more about a person than the promises that go with that. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time here, and we thank you for the hope that is ours. Not simply hope for all of our dreams to be made real, not simply for hope that things will go well for us, but hope that is wrapped up in you, in the person of Jesus. Our Father, we ask that you would continually fuel inside us this hope, a longing to be with our Savior, the lover of our souls. And that with that, it would change all of our perspectives and priorities in this life as we long for that. And we thank you in Jesus' name.